What we find in this case is something very real happened to them. They have all of the various symptoms of being exposed to some type of radiation. Now, the type of radiation is an unknown to us because the strange part is that the symptoms are not classic of ionizing or of microwave or of any other specific one, but more of the nature of a mixture of radiations. And that puzzles us because generally devices don't put out a mixture of radiations.
You're in McDonnell Douglas aircraft. What would do something like this?
We don't know. We've looked into all of the technology that we see flying today, working at the Space Center as we do. We find that it's very easy to tell you what's going on, so to say. The leading edge of technology is visible. The secret edge probably isn't. But nevertheless, we don't see the technology that could have done this. It appears that there was some high generation source, probably a microwave, but maybe with a little bit of X-ray thrown in. And this is an unknown device to us.
What did the Air Force say to all this?
We've had no help from anyone as far as defining what happened here. We have a case where we had a UFO of some type, an unidentified flying object, not necessarily a flying saucer. We had a number of helicopters, obviously military, and we can find no one that will take credit for any of that. No branch of the military service, no organization of the government. But we're convinced, because of these people and the other witnesses, that this really did happen.
Now, you interviewed the other witnesses. What did they say about these military aircraft?
We have some very good witnesses. One of the witnesses was an ex-Army man that had jumped from helicopters in an airborne unit, and he was very familiar with the type of helicopter seen here. He also saw them and said that's exactly what was here. He described the formation in which they flew, the way they acted. Obviously, they were here.
What are these helicopters used for?
Well, generally they're used for transportation, heavy loads, troop insertion, that sort of thing.
Could these helicopters have been carrying this device?
It's possible. It's very possible that one of them could have been carrying it. The type of helicopters used here were a CH-47. That's a twin-rotor, large lift, heavy capability unit. They generally don't multiple sling an object. In other words, 2 helicopters or 3 don't carry one object. So it would have had to have been something that could have been carried within the weight limitations of 1 helicopter. And the size of the thing, being like the water tank in the city nearby, makes that rather prohibitive, but not impossible.
This family has suffered serious medical problems and emotional problems.
Definitely true.
What have you found?
We have monitored this since the first month. We have documented all of it in writing, with photographs, with tape recordings, with video recordings. We are convinced of the continuing trauma that the people are experiencing. We don't have an explanation for it. We are worried about it, and we do need help on it. We would like to see more witnesses come forward. We'd also like to see some responsibility taken by someone in the government, one of the services, particularly to tell us what type of radiation was seen. It's not necessary to say why it was done, just a matter of how can we best treat them.
Are these symptoms that these people suffered common throughout the experiences other people have suffered that you've investigated?
Well, these people have seen more trauma than most cases. Not all, but most. There are other cases, such as a gentleman in Canada in 1967 suffered very similar effects to what these people have seen. He had the burns, the illness, the weakness, the weight loss and all. But in most cases, it's generally limited to eye damage or maybe some minor burns.
Project Blue Book was closed. Do you think that there is still an organization investigating UFOs, or do you think that the government has some type of agency that just isn't telling us what's going on?
I really don't believe so. I think that it's being stonewalled completely to the point they don't even have a group doing it, and I think that's wrong. There's enough proof that people are being hurt, objects are being seen, something mysterious is still going on, just like it was in the days of Blue Book, and something should be done to monitor it.
What do you think?
I think there should be a special agency set up, not under one of the military branches, but under a civilian agency to do this.
And if a civilian agency gets the job, they're obviously not going to get any money.
Well, it requires budget. We know how it is working without a budget. Getting people medical examinations and just travel alone, the two things are very expensive. And without a budget, they couldn't function.
What do your pictures show?
Our pictures show hair loss, extreme hair loss. They show swollen, puffy eyes, red eyes. They show skin conditions where there are large sores, darkened skin, burns, scars. That's generally what they show. You know, visibly, that's what you can see. You can't see the other things, such as weight loss and that sort of thing. It has a sampling of the hair loss seen by Mrs. Cash, for instance.
How rapid did this happen?
It happened fairly soon. She had a minor amount, but about the third week was when the major hair loss occurred, when great chunks of hair came out. And we have documentation to show that she had a tremendous head of hair before this happened, because it was Christmas season and she had her hair fixed and had it photographed, in fact, for Christmas. So it gave us a real good way of comparing it. This was only 4 days later.
What about the skin irritation?
The skin irritation is very significant also. This is a heel sore, but those that are not healed are things like this.
That's unbelievable.
This is Mrs. Landrum's hand months later. This was at least 8 months later, still showing the blue burn and the like and sores, and they swell up and burst. This is not something that was scratched and gouged. This is something that actually came internally from the change in probably immunological system. These are pictures of Mrs. Landrum's hand and her arm, showing some of the damage that she incurred that occurred months later. These sores started coming up very soon, and she'd go through cycles. Some months that they would kind of go away, and other months they would come back. This was during a flare-up. Over about a 4-day period, this came from just a scar-type area to a sore to a ruptured sore, and then went away.
Back in the days of the 50s, when they were experimenting with the bombs, the nuclear bombs, people and soldiers were exposed to this type of radiation. Has there been any comparative data showing a correlation between this type of an infliction here and what the other people suffered? Is it
Unfortunately
uniform?
not. Much of that data is not available to us. We've been trying to get, but see, the Privacy Act prevents you from getting medical records on individuals. And that's a real problem for us in making comparisons. We have talked to various agencies that do research on radiation, and find that they can manifest themselves in all sorts of ways. You know, it depends on the individual, on the person's background, their weight, the kind of medicines they've been taking, or lack of medicines. Things like the types of vitamins they've been taking can affect how the radiation affects them.
Are these burns something unique? Have you ever seen anything like this before?
This is not what we normally see. This case is much more severe. And all three of these people, they had sores of this nature. If only one had you should say maybe they had an allergic reaction or something. But not when 3 people have the very similar type conditions. So it is unique.
What do the doctors say?
Have
they ever seen anything like this?
The doctors had no idea what was going on, to be honest about it. Doctors generally know very little about UFOs. They generally know very little about something like this. And when a person comes in with some specific symptom, they start the standard test that they normally run. They go through a whole series of things and end up saying, we don't know what it is. That's essentially what happened here.
This is 3 years later. Vickie and Colby, 2 years later. Vickie and Colby are still having to undergo inspections of their blood, and they're still suffering from this. This is 2 years later. What does that mean?
Well, to me, it means that they had a significant dose of some type of radiation. Not necessarily ionizing radiation, but maybe microwave. Something that changed their systems, that damaged cells. And it's really, to me, a verification that something significant happened. If it had been a passing thing, like in 2 months, they'd gone through the whole cycle and it was gone, I would think, well, it was a very minor exposure. But when obviously their immunological systems have been affected, their health in general have been affected, that means something significant happened.
When we tried to contact the people at the Air Force Base here, everyone involved at that time has since been transferred out, and we can't even locate them. What does that mean?
Well, with the military, it could mean simply that they've done their normal thing, they've rotated people. But it does make you suspect that there's a little more to it, particularly when we didn't get answers either in the first place when people were there. So it is a strange situation, and it just adds to the mystery. And the mystery could be eradicated by somebody just talking frankly about it.
How many witnesses were there to this event?
Well, to the event where it took place, there were only the 3 people that were injured. But there are other witnesses to an object coming over the area that night, ranging from Liberty, Texas, which is some 25 miles from where we're standing today, to within 3 or 4 miles of this location.